I'm Nora, a 33-year-old housewife. When growing up, I was one of those children who had every imaginable allergy under the sun. Except for maybe air and water. So as a result, it made me very self-aware when it came to experimenting with different types of food. Where for most people it was about preference, for me it was a matter of life or death. It wasn't something I harped on or made much ado about, but like I said, it was something I was always aware of and most of the people around me was conscious about. For the most part, it served as more of a nuisance than anything. If I were invited to a birthday party or wedding or any gathering that required catering, I was one of the ones who was singled out for special treatment. No one ever complained, at least to me, but I always thought it could be a bit annoying. For the most part, depending on what I ate, it would just be a mild inconvenience, some swelling here, itching and redness there. On a few occasions, I would have to go to the hospital because of the severity. Only once I recall eating and laughing with friends, and carelessly I picked up one of the biscuits that was filled with meat. I later learned, when I woke up in the hospital, it was crab meat. I was 15 at the time. Ever since then I was always cognizant about the foods that was being served and learned to make better choices for myself. No experimenting allowed. The only time I remember cursing my allergies was when I was in college. I was dating the boy I had a crush on since grade school. Finally, after many years of fawning over pictures my friends and I surreptitiously snapped, or having dreamy eyes when I saw him, he asked me out. I said yes before the words finished coming out of his mouth. We had been going out for nearly a month at the time, and I couldn't be happier. It was perfect, or so I thought. It was his immature friends who instigated the whole thing. Looking back, I could have handled it differently too. But we were both young. While eating out, my friends were eating and drinking, having a relatively enjoyable time. My boyfriend was especially enjoying himself. He nearly ate every shrimp on the table, non-stop. But my allergies weren't his, so I didn't say anything. Although periodically everyone kept commenting on me, since all I could find safe to eat was the salad. What? Are you on a diet or something? Here, eat. One of them would say. No, I'm not on a diet. I just can't eat certain types of food, I had said. Of course, to poor college students I may as well have been speaking in a foreign tongue. We ate what was put in front of us. Pickiness had no place during that time. So once in a while, when someone had enough money to splurge, we splurged. My boyfriend, who had more drinks than he should have, reacted poorly. He scooped up a lot of the shrimp and put it in my salad. Don't be rude. Eat it. Yeah, eat it. Why did we even invite her? She's being rude. One of his friends said. So as not to inflame them further, I toyed with the salad with my fork and tried to pick out the salad and not the shrimp. Maybe this would calm them down a bit, I remember thinking. But after a while of picking around for the lettuce, tomatoes, anything I could eat, it hit me. One minute I was listening to their lame jokes and trying to make myself laugh with them so I wouldn't stick out, and the next, well, let's just say it didn't end well. Before I could control myself I began throwing up, clutching at my throat and fainted from dizziness. Thankfully the people in the restaurant acted quickly and called for an ambulance. It was later learned they had this happen before and admonished me for not telling them about my food allergies ahead of time. They profusely apologized and offered to pay compensation for my hospital bills and treatment. I felt bad for having to accept it, since I knew full well I shouldn't have eaten it. But I was poor and needed the payment for my hospital stay. Ironically, instead of my boyfriend apologizing for pressuring me to eat something that could have killed me, he broke up with me. Not because I did anything wrong, but because he felt embarrassed that I vomited in front of all of his friends at the table. So yeah, like I said, we were young and immature. It was my, now husband Jordan, who turned out to be the most sympathetic and cautious when it came to introducing foods to me. Although it could be an inconvenience to him sometimes, he didn't seem to mind and he never complained. As a show of solidarity, he wouldn't allow certain foods in the house and only ate the forbidden foods when he was out or at lunch from work. It was his mother and sister who constantly accused me of faking my allergies to excuse myself for being spoiled and picky. This ideology mostly came from the fact that, whenever we went to my in-laws' house, I would have to bring my own food. I knew this could be considered rude, but it couldn't be helped. My husband tried to explain on my behalf numerous times. And each time the same thing. Does she think she's better than us? Who dares go to someone else's house and not eat what's offered? Is this how she was raised, to insult her hosts? My mother-in-law said this each time we visited, without fail. Mom, I have allergies. Some are severe, so I can't eat certain foods, I tried to explain. Mom. Who here is your mother? Am I your mother? Do you do this at your mother's house? Humph. Later my husband would say to me how his mother took pride in her cooking and loved when her children enjoyed and complimented her food. He promised he would explain my food allergies to her again so she could understand and not be so harsh with me. And it seemed to work, at least for a little while. Jordan told me about your food allergies. I guess I just didn't get it, she said one day when we had gone over to visit. In my day there was no such thing, we kids ate what was put in front of us. I remember getting a good spanking one time when I didn't finish what my granny put on my plate. We didn't get away with all this allergic nonsense. Jordan and I glanced over to each other and snickered. Just by that statement alone, we both knew she still didn't get it. But we let her ramble on. His sister Karen was visiting with her husband and 2 small children too. But it was her comment that would further exacerbate the situation. You'd think she'd understand and take my side, but she was a real mama's baby and sided with her mother, no matter what. Even if you could prove her to be wrong, she would just stand firm. Right or wrong, do or die. Why don't you try to eat a little bit of the things you're allergic to and train your body to accept it? Karen chimed in, supporting her mother, as usual. That's ironic coming from you since your son has peanut allergies. Will you do the same thing to him? My husband said, appalled. He had a genuine look of horror on his face. Karen stumbled and stuttered for a moment, then spat out. That's stupid. He's just a small child. Of course I wouldn't do that. His body isn't mature enough to do that. I don't recommend you ever do that, no matter his age. That could be very dangerous, I said. Of course I wouldn't do that, Karen said. Then she looked from me to her husband, who looked equally as appalled and horrified as my husband did. She slightly shook her head and touched her husband's arm saying, would never do such a thing. Then Jordan said. Then aren't you being a hypocrite? No. I just think she's old enough to start experimenting and trying new things. Some allergies you have when you're young may not be the case when you get older. That's all I'm saying. All right, forget about it, my mother-in-law said. I get it. Jordan and I began to go low contact with them from this point. Although I was used to this type of behavior, it was quite new for him. It was something he never thought about, since he never had anything to worry about when it came to food. It was because he loved me so much that he made himself aware, for my sake. So, when his cousin Didi was getting married, we knew we had to deal with the family drama again. For the most part, his other family members were pretty empathetic and accommodating. Didi, being aware of my condition, made a point to ask me what I could eat so I could enjoy a meal with the other family members. She ensured Jordan and I that they would have a special dish for me so I need not worry. We were relieved, to be honest. It was a hassle to go to events with a lunch basket, like we were going on a picnic. It was awkward and oftentimes embarrassing. So this time I would be able to attend and not have to worry. Because Didi's family owned a catering business for all types of events, I knew I was in capable hands. I was certain they had to deal with all sorts of dietary needs and limitations to satisfy their customers, so I didn't think twice about accepting her offer to make a special meal for me. Big mistake. During dinner we were sharing a table with my husband's family. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law sat huddled with their heads together, speaking in hushed whispered tones while my husband alternated from talking to me and my sister-in-law's husband. But when my husband turned back to say something to me, his eyes got wide with horror. What's wrong with your face? I could feel my face starting to feel itchy and slightly numb, but I didn't know that the swelling had begun. What's wrong with my face? Do I look bad? Do we have to go? Oh my God. You look like the Elephant Man. What's wrong with your face? My sister-in-law said this real loud, making all of the other tables turn to look over at our table. But soon the concerned chatter and nervous laughter was drowned out. I was going into that notorious black hole of unconsciousness. I began ripping at the collar on my dress, then clawing at my throat as the tightness of the swelling began, cutting off my air supply. Call an ambulance. Jordan shouted at the onlookers. He dumped the contents of my purse and frantically looked until he located my EpiPen. I remember thinking to myself, thank God I brought it with me, before slipping into dark oblivion. The day before Didi and her new husband left for their honeymoon, they came to visit me and Jordan. She was so apologetic and couldn't stop crying. She insisted that she took the utmost care to ensure there would be no mishaps and expressly gave instructions to her mother about my condition. In the end, I believed her. But it was Jordan who didn't want to forgive them for this incident. Don't you know she could have died by this one mistake? How could you be so careless? We trusted you. I don't know if it was due to anger, frustration, or the fear of losing me, but he was livid. I don't know what happened. My mother insisted she would handle it personally. I know she was busy and overwhelmed, which is why she called for her sisters and our cousins to come and help. But I trusted her with this task. Please forgive me. I'll get to the bottom of it. She has food allergies. And though some of them aren't as severe and just cause minor itching, swelling and irritation, some foods can kill her. It causes anaphylaxis, which can be fatal. He continued yelling at her. Later my husband accused me of being too gullible and naive for wanting to believe Didi so quickly. He was so angry he told her if they didn't get to the bottom of it he was going to press charges and make a formal complaint about their company. True to her word, as soon as Didi and her husband returned from their honeymoon, they began to investigate what happened. Because her family ran a very esteemed catering business, their reputation was at stake. It didn't take long to find out what happened. Because Didi's mother gained a notoriety in her field, she developed many contacts within her field. She had a great relationship with the venue where her daughter was holding her wedding, so they agreed to allow her to use their kitchen to cut down on the unnecessary drama to have to transport food from one location to another. This proved to be a godsend. Didi and her mother, my husband's maternal aunt, showed up unannounced early one morning. He became rigid at the sight of them, but I calmed him down and made him promise he would listen and hear them out. After all, it was his family and they were making an effort to correct their mistake. His Aunt Belinda came in and hugged me right away, crying. I'm so sorry for all of this. It's my fault. Didi explained to me all of your food allergens and I told her not to worry. I had the perfect dish prepared for you, she said this as she was constantly wiping away her steady flow of tears. Jordan didn't look moved in the slightest. He looked ready to attack. He was still seething about the whole fiasco. But I kept stroking his arm, reminding him to remain calm and hear them out. For some reason, I believed them. I didn't have a contentious relationship with them. They were always so kind and considerate of me and my needs. I was more curious how such a thing could happen and how to prevent it in the future. Didi collapsed in the seat next to her mother, head hung down. Jordy, I know you can't forgive us and I know you want justice for what happened. Please, look at this first. She handed him a USB drive. If you still want to go to the authorities and make a complaint against our company, I won't stop you. For the first time since this all happened, I could see a look of uncertainty in his expression. He just nodded at his aunt and favorite cousin. Okay. We'll discuss it again after I've seen it. Aunt Belinda and Didi left, head hanging with a heavy heart. It's up to you, how do you want to handle this, he asked me. It's your family. I'll stand by whatever you think is best. When I said this, he hugged me and opened up his laptop. It was decided. When Jordan saw the CCTV recording on the thumb drive, he knew he had to press charges. On the next family visit he was going to announce it. So, when we went to his mother's house for our monthly visit he called to ensure his sister and husband would be there. Then he called his Aunt Belinda and Dee to come as well. The smell of food permeated the air when we walked in. It turned my stomach thinking about putting it to my mouth. I noticed even Jordan's nose turned up slightly at the smell. Jordan started right away, saying, "Now that we're all here I won't beat around the bush. It's been decided that we will be pressing charges for what happened at the wedding. This was an unforgivable, malicious act." "What? Are you saying you're going to put your aunt and cousin in jail?" My mother-in-law looked around at us. She feigned concern as she went on. "I'm sure it was just an accident, cross-contamination, I'm sure of it. But don't you think it's harsh to have them arrested for this?" She pointed at me, you could clearly see the disdain she had for me. "Just for her, she's not even blood to us." "Mom's right. How can you have Aunt Belinda arrested for this? And Dee just came off her honeymoon. They're our blood." Karen chimed in. Just like always, she was parroting whatever her mother said. No mind of her own. No discerning right from wrong, good from evil. My mother-in-law continued. "I warned Belinda that going into the catering business wasn't a good idea. She's always thought herself to be the cook in the family. But still, pressing charges." She then looked to Aunt Belinda. "I know you've always competed with me when it came to cooking. I don't blame you. I'll forgive you. But what you've done was unthinkable. How could you call yourself a cook and poison your guests? I can't blame them for how they feel. I mean, how embarrassing to be wheeled out on a stretcher looking like some kind of monster. Just promise you'll just close down that little catering business of yours and I'll see if I can talk Jordy out of this." Karen stood next to her mother and just nodded her head up and down like a crazy bobblehead doll. "Mom's right. Just close it down and we'll forget all this happened. If not, you'll just have to risk it and possibly go to jail. It was due to your negligence that all this happened." To Aunt Belinda and Dee's credit, they remained silent. They just stared at them in stunned disbelief at their audacity. "Check your phone messages," Jordan said. Simultaneously all of our phones pinged at the same time. It was sickening, but I looked at it again. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law could be seen searching the kitchen like they were on a black op mission. They could be seen laughing as they looked for the food specially made for me. When they found it, you could see them giving each other a high five and laughing. My sister-in-law stood as lookout while my mother-in-law could be seen dipping the chicken prepared for me into the same pan that shrimp and lobster was being prepared. Though they were continuously looking around so not to be caught in their nefarious act, they neglected to look up, once. Otherwise they would have seen the camera pointing directly at them. Then my mother-in-law could be seen pouring a remnant of the oil from the shrimp and lobster onto my salad, tossing it carefully then wrapping it all back and putting it back in place as if nothing happened. And if this had worked, my husband and I would have always believed this was due to the careless and unsanitary way his aunt and cousin ran their business. But it was clear and without any doubt, this was a deliberate, malicious criminal act between his mother and sister against me. "What is the meaning of this?" my mother-in-law said. Karen just let out a short shrieking sound. Aunt Belinda countered. "That's what we want to know. How could you do something this stupid and dangerous? Do you have any idea how badly this could have gone? But instead of being remorseful and fall to your knees and beg for forgiveness from Jordan and Nora, you have the gall to further insult me and Dee like this. Shame on you. I've always known you to be a cold, heartless woman. But even this is more than what I truly knew about you. You're pathetic." Jordan looked to my sister-in-law's husband and said, "I've called you here to tell you to make any necessary arrangements about the kids. I will not spare them. They will go to jail for this. I've already pressed charges and turned over the evidence to the police." My mother-in-law collapsed to the floor, while Karen began crying and begging for her husband to listen to her as she tried to blame it all on her mother. It was her idea. She made me go along. I didn't want to do it, she kept saying. Jordan, Aunt Belinda, Dee and I left them to deal with each other. It was official. We didn't want to ever see them again. This was the last straw. When the rest of the family found out, it was a 50-50 split. Half the family agreed with our decision to press charges while the other half thought we were too harsh and should have given them a break. But this prompted my husband to go no contact with his entire family, and we only talked to Aunt Belinda and Dee Dee a few times a year. Aunt Belinda and Dee Dee's catering business began to pick up and was booming. It was becoming so successful, in fact, they were actually considering expanding and hiring more staff. Soon after, my husband and I put our house up for sale and quickly got an offer we couldn't refuse. The housing market was going up and we decided to rent a small place for the time being until we finally found our dream home. As for my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, they were both charged with a second-degree felony for food tampering and was facing up to 15 years in prison. We don't really know what happened after that. Jordan left it up to the courts if they wanted to show mercy and leniency towards his mother and sister. But as far as he was concerned, they were dead to him.
Thank you for listening to my story. Come back for more stories and help us grow our channel. Bye.